I'm here with Tanner Johnson, and let's start.
How's it going, Darren?
Not too bad. It's been a long time. I'm sure there's plenty for us to catch up on, and uh, I'm sure we've gone in potentially different directions than where we were when we first interacted with each other.
Yeah, I actually hadn't realized you'd moved to Chicago.
Yes, that happened 2016.
All right.
So I've been here almost 4 years.
How are you liking it compared to Seattle?
Well, I think the biggest difference is I never actually lived in Seattle, so I hadn't lived in a big city, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of like the biggest difference, was actually moving into a big city. Uh and then I think the other thing was just I would say that an issue I had a lot was trying to remember what direction I was going, because I didn't have that memory map of oh, if I see this thing, then I know I'm going this way.
Yeah,
So
yeah, missing the landmarks.
yeah, and especially since the biggest landmarks are here. You have the big lake, but if you're
Yeah,
not next to it, then you have to figure out what buildings are big enough that you can see to know which direction you're going. So
yeah, no convenient volcanoes to tell you
right,
where
yeah,
you're
that
facing.
that that's definitely something I never really thought about until I left, and then realized I have no idea what way I'm walking. Yeah, that was something I've had to overcome, and or am probably still dealing with.
Yeah. So, did you move there for a job?
Yes. So I moved here in 2016 to work for Sprout Social, and I've been working with them since.
Other than
So,
QA, what do you do?
so let's see. Outside of, in terms of professionally, or
I don't know,
just for
hobbies
fun.
or.
I would say I still game frequently, um, and occasionally I draw. I sometimes, currently it's on hold, but I host or run a D&D campaign.
Nice.
Um, I play in a D&D campaign. Uh, what else? I don't know. I kind of just do whatever I'm inspired to do. Sometimes I cook. Sometimes uh, I don't know. I do
That's cool.
lots of different things. What about
It's
you?
crazy.
What are
Yeah, it's
you?
crazy how many people who are in the test and game industry and stuff play D&D. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I feel like it's a very high percentage.
Mm. Yeah, I'd be curious to find out what sort of I mean, because D&D really is. I mean, it's up for anyone to enjoy. So it's
Yeah.
I'm curious if there is a particular thing that people grab onto that cause them to play it. I know for me, uh, I was introduced to it. I don't know, back in 2003, 2004, something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm not really sure what really grabbed me then, outside of I was I don't know, it dealt with fantasy stuff, and I liked fantasy things.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really was into like any sort of like big fantasy books or anything. So I think
Oh
it
yeah.
was like second best because I actually got to be the character in the story versus
Yeah.
just reading about some character in a story.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, my intro was definitely after, Lord of the Rings,
Mm,
you know, gateway to fantasy for a lot of us, I think.
yeah.
And I like the idea of playing as a hobbit or a ranger, that type of thing.
Yeah, I don't think I ever actually played as a human until recently.
Yeah.
I think most of my characters were either like dwarfs or other.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
it's a fantasy game. You might as well, right?
well, I mean, I think that's mostly been my feelings on it. Is like, why would I want to play a fantasy game as a human, which just seems
Right,
kind of
right.
boring.
Indeed.
What about you? What have you been up to since the let's see, 2012?
Yeah, we were working together in 2012. I can't remember the last game we worked together on, but a whole bunch of people left that place. And I think there were layoffs too, which, happens in
Yeah.
this industry. Um, yeah, I went straight to Big Fish Games and been there ever since. Just kind of, I don't know, had a lot of opportunities there, and it's worked pretty well. In terms of uh, development, I began making games on the side while I was a tester at WB Games,
Mm.
doing game jams during the weekends and stuff like that. It just kind of escalated from there. At some point at Big Fish, the director of engineering and I talked, and she said, "Yeah, we have an opportunity to step into a beginning engineer role," and I said I'd be interested. So
That's awesome.
yeah, not every company would give you an opportunity like that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
very thankful that I got the opportunity I did.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of the same with like a lot of people that I've heard go into like QA was purely just to get into a have that be your like foot in the door to then get like a position doing something else in games.
Yeah, yeah, a ton of people on our team were have QA experience. Both of our producers, several of our designers,
Yeah.
and yeah, you can definitely tell, that QA experience makes you really look at things from a different perspective, and you never really stop being a tester, I think.
Yeah, I have very much felt that throughout like everything I've done is
Hmm.
there's a sense of like you just look at problems slightly differently.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, they don't even have to be problems. You just look at things differently.
yeah.
Um, how has there been anything in particular from QA that you've I I guess that has like stood out the most to you as something you use frequently?
Well, just trying to think of edge cases. I think that's something we do
Mm,
in QA all the time, and that's something we have to do as a developer all the time. And there's so many possibilities that,
yeah.
you know, it's you can look at those all day and find interesting things with something as complicated as a game.
Right. Yeah. I of the places I've worked, I feel like coming going from games to non-games was like a I feel like games there was just so much more that I had to think about
Yeah.
than going into non-games. Like there's so many
Hmm.
different interactions going on versus most other things I've worked on.
Interesting.
Did you always want to make games, or was that something that you got into like the games industry and then saw the how they were moved along in the development life cycle and you got interested?
No, I never really thought about it as a career possibility. I graduated high school and I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. So I went to the University of Arizona and started learning Japanese, and I don't know. It was just kind of taking classes, and also, I tried linguistics, I tried some history, I tried all sorts of stuff and never really got into anything.
Mm.
Um, and so, it came later when one of my friends moved up here and said, "Hey, if you come up here, we can get you a job testing games." It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. There were definitely several aha moments in that first testing job where it's like, oh, that's how games work. Games just kind of put a picture in front of another picture and then they move it.
Mm.
So that's kind of, at some point, what really actually got me into making games was a couple of our coworkers, Tina and Derek, and
Mm.
Victor, actually were talking about making a game. And Tina's like, yeah, I can do the art. And Derek's like, I can do the design. And Victor's like, I can do the audio. And I was like, man, I have nothing. I can't do anything. So decided to get into Python. That's how it all
Mm.
started.
Yeah, I recently had something similar happen, and by recent I mean it was probably, I don't know, like a year ago or something. There was a similar feeling of like, how can I contribute to something if like the all the perceived roles were being filled.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So you got into Python with that, and what did that then lead to?
Yeah, so I picked up a book by Al Swigert, I believe is how you pronounce his name, called Invent Games with Python and Pygame, I think it was. It's actually
Mm.
free online. It's just amazing because it gives you simple games, and they start out with really simple stuff like tic-tac-toe, in the
Mm.
command line.
Right.
And it gives you the entire game, and it'll just be like 2 pages of text. And it encourages you to take the book, look at the book, type that text into your Python environment, line by line, and try to understand what each line does.
Mm.
And kind of talks about each line a little bit, but that wasn't the part I liked. The part I liked was just getting the program all set up and then modifying things and seeing, okay, if I change this value here, that happens in the game.
Yeah.
So I kind of did it backward compared to how he recommended, but it was just invaluable.
Yeah.
Um, and then he had another really cool thing afterward, which he'd give you the same games but with a few changes, and they would produce bugs, and you were
Mm.
supposed to figure out how to fix those bugs. And man, that was really educational. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that.
Yeah. I feel like I kind of went through the same when I was playing around with Python. I only just recently got my Pygame stuff working, so
Yeah,
I had attempted to do it multiple times, but every time I've tried like getting into any of those like I don't know, there's probably a lot of reasons for why it's happened, but like every time I've tried to like get into one of the like make a game books, uh I've ended up like not getting like exactly the same thing that they had, and so
yeah,
I would need to like try to figure out what they're talking about because
yeah,
what I'm looking at is not what they're talking about, and
yeah,
then I end up just getting frustrated and
yeah. I know the
stopping.
feeling. Yeah, it's like you'll, look up a tutorial on YouTube. Like I've been trying to learn Blender lately,
Mm.
and I find a tutorial, and it's just I open Blender and I look at theirs, and they're completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the setup guides are a really important thing that a lot of people don't include when they make
Yeah.
tutorials. It's
Yeah.
not just even the version. It might be they're using a different layout with different hotkeys, and to them it's just, they have it memorized, and it's so fast that they don't even think that we have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, seeing people like go through those things with like hotkeys set up and like they're just like clicking around all over the place creating these things. I'm like, I don't get what's going on right now, but it looks
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, yeah, I'll definitely send you the link to that book because I highly recommend it for anyone. It's amazing, and he does have an extensive setup section where
mm,
it says, "This is the version of Python you need. This is the version of Pygame you need," etc.
yeah, yeah. I was doing a Space Invader tutorial,
Hmm.
which I mean worked relatively well, but I don't. It didn't really feel like they really made Space Invader. They just kind of made something that sort of looks like Space Invader,
Sure.
uh, which is fine. I mean, it gave me enough of what I needed to just start playing around with, like trying to do singular features.
Hmm.
Uh, uh, what did you end up making for like the game, or did you guys finish it?
Yeah, so we messed around a little bit. We came up with this weird game idea that we've actually played with on and off for like the past 6 years or whatever, probably more than that, where you're a hunter and you're hunting really rare animals. And
Mm,
just because it was funny to us for some reason, and I think we had some idea there would be some story like they were possessed, or maybe you were hitting them with tranquilizers and eventually saving them somehow. But
mm,
yeah, so you're just walking around the screen, vertically and horizontally, and pandas and uh, I guess ostriches aren't that rare, but ostriches and all sorts of things are running at you. But
mm.
there was never very much uh, of a progression to that. So our
Right.
first, the thing that really helped me learn was doing game jams. We
Mm,
registered for something called Bacon Game Jam. I think it was Bacon Game Jam 5 or 6, which is, and game jams, and I should briefly explain, they have a set amount of time in which you complete a game using a set rules,
mm,
often with a suggestion as to the theme of the game or some sort of word you're supposed to incorporate somehow.
right.
And Bacon Game Jam was a 48-hour game jam, so we started Friday night, we ended Sunday night, and the theme was light.
Mm,
So we decided to make a pie game, and it was a tile-based game. So you just had a character that moved from tile to tile, solving puzzle rooms, and he was a little light bulb. He had a sword, or no, he did not have a sword. Excuse me. He was a little light bulb in knight's armor, so it was called Nightlight, as in
mm,
Knight. And I have no idea how we finished that game because we never made something complete before. But
mm.
somehow, in those last couple hours before the deadline on Sunday, we made a game, and we couldn't believe it.
Very cool.
So sometimes pressure is really good for making you just kind of stop worrying about how you're going to do something and just do it.
And that was like back in what, 2010, 2011 or something?
2013, I don't
Oh,
know, 2013 or something.
oh, okay.
Maybe before that actually. I think it was while I was still at WB Games. So yeah,
I want to
2012.
say I want to say I remember maybe you guys posting something on like
Yeah, we
Facebook or
we
something.
We emailed them out actually, I think, to the community threads at WB Games.
Yeah, I
Which,
swear I remember something.
yeah, and we actually did quite a few of those game jams, and yeah, learned a ton from those.
Very cool. What is there any like one particular thing that like stands out to you of like something you've taken away from it?
Just if I do a personal project um, with no time constraints, I just it takes forever to get started. It takes forever to do step one, step two. With game jams, where you have that time limit, you're forced to move on from those steps really fast. So you're forced to do things that you'd never do on your own in free
Mm.
time. And that's invaluable, I think.
Have you tried adapting the things you do with that same type of frantic energy?
Yeah, I mean, our development that we do at our studio is very much not in the game jam
Mm.
sense. And that makes sense. We're trying to make a product to put in front of people.
Sure.
Um, but there are times where I wish that we could move a bit more quickly, and actually our team has been moving in that direction. And that's where the whole agile methodology, comes up. It's kind of game jam like in that you're trying to make something releasable by the end of the sprint.
Right.
And try to make something impactful and releasable. And that's pretty much the same idea as a game jam. You're trying to get to the end, by the end of the game jam, you want to have something to show people. So I think agile methodology, in essence, is embracing that game jam ideal.
Yeah. Yeah, I I don't think. I mean, most of my experience in games was very not agile. Um, so I'm curious what that even looks like since I haven't
Sure.
experienced that.
Yeah, I can briefly summarize the way I think that it should work for games. I know I've been at game companies where they've said they're doing agile and they're not at all.
Mm,
But of course, agile also is different depending on what you're doing. But
right.
the idea is you have these short sprints. I think they're often 2 weeks, but I don't know. There's no reason it can't be a week. The focus is no longer on documentation. Instead, it's on creating things and on implementation as quickly as you can. You kind of have a kickoff meeting where you're like, here's what we want to do. Here are our goals. Here are our stories that we, or sorry, yeah, it depends on where you're at. We don't really do goals and stories at this point. We do tasks. But like I said, everyone's different. But you
Yeah.
come together as a team. You decide what you want to do. You decide who's in charge of knowing whether you're on the right path, and then you just try to do it. It's works best if it's a really small group, so our whole team isn't involved um, in a single task. It's just maybe a coder and an artist and a designer and QA, with the producers listening in and kind of helping out, and the product owner deciding whether we're going down the right path.
Mm,
And the ideal is we get it working as quickly as possible, and then we iterate. And we iterate as many times as we can in our time limit. And hopefully by the end of the time limit, we've come up with something that satisfies the requirements, and we can move on to the next thing. Or
mm,
if it doesn't, we spend more time on it, or maybe it's determined that it wasn't worth spending any more time on.
right. Uh, how do you typically go about like breaking down something to fit it within your timeline or that sprint?
Yeah, sizing is really hard. Sizing tasks, and everyone has a different method for doing it. Some people like to try to estimate how many hours it'll take. Some people try to just kind of assign a point value to it
Right.
that has no value other than how many points you generally can accomplish in a sprint.
Sure.
So, yeah, that's that. If you have a good answer to that question, I think you can make a lot of money as a consultant.
That's true. Is there anything in particular that you typically like look for when sort of sizing up a particular item?
Well, personally, I like subdividing tasks into smaller subtasks, and then having really clear acceptance criteria.
Mm,
And in theory, those acceptance criteria kind of become the beginning of my development. I make tests saying, does it do this? Does it do that? And then start development and just kind of work until, yes, it does do that. Yes, it does do
mm,
this.
okay. Do you feel like other people also have that similar approach, or do you think that's relatively unique to your work
No,
style?
that's definitely not unique to me. But some people prefer to have less specific tasks and just kind of have the end goal in mind. And
Mm.
um, I can definitely understand that.
So if you could throw away like all that perceived notion of like working in an agile style or Kanban or waterfall or like whatever name you want to call it, like what would your ideal work style be?
A game jam. If I could just make games in that style.
Do like
But I don't think
2-day
that's, yeah.
hacks?
Yeah, and then I mean, I've pitched that, just been like, let's just do game jams. Let's get one engineer, a designer, an artist, and whoever. Let's just make small teams, make a bunch of games, and then see which ones really feel fun. Then once we hit on one, let's expand it. But the problem is, of course, there's quite a few issues with that.
Sure.
You might be wasting
Right.
time. You want to make sure that the product everyone is working on actually has a chance in the marketplace.
Yeah.
But it's a fun
Yeah.
idea.
It's hard to push that type of idea anywhere if you don't have the data to back it up that it works. Because it's, a liability. Like, how can we guarantee that this will make money if, like, we just set people out for 2 days to work on something?
Right.
Yeah. But we can always live in the hypothetical sometimes.
Yeah.
So I guess we're kind of dipping into it, but so you're currently at Big Fish, right?
Yeah, I'm a senior engineer at Big Fish Games.
Has there been any sort of learning opportunities that stand out to you? Like any like big sort of maybe aha moments or small things that you then like look back on and you're like, oh, I've become this person I am today because of these small steps?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's just I made a decision to put my free time after work playing games all day and testing and stuff, and not playing games in a fun way. Instead of playing games when I got home, I just wanted to learn to make games, and just sticking with it, trying again and again, hitting my head against the wall again, when I was blocked by issues, and it all paid off.
Is there like I don't really know much of Big Fish's catalogs outside of there's a lot of games that they've made.
Yeah.
Is there like a one that you're most proud of that you've worked on?
Definitely Blast, Fairway Solitaire Blast. It was a really fun game, really fun team. I didn't enjoy the game engine, but I learned a lot. It was made in basically Adobe Flash. So that was interesting. I'd never worked in that before, and hopefully never have to work in it again. But yeah, it was a ton of fun. I got to work on the game server. I got to work on the client. It was just a really good team.
Nice.
People liked the game. Unfortunately, the technology just kind of was too old. It got to the point where Apple and Google would have requirements, and we basically needed an update from Adobe.
Yeah.
And Adobe basically doesn't support it anymore.
All right.
So it was an unfortunate technology choice, I think, for that game.
Is there anything about being in QA that you miss?
Being in QA that I met, getting paid hourly. that was nice. There were some weeks, some months where that would have really been nice. But in general, Big Fish is really good about not doing too much pressured overtime and that type of thing. But sometimes when you break the server, you kind of have to be the one to fix it. So there were a lot of learnings on Blast.
Do you feel like the games industries are that's still a problem I know in the news there's been like lots of talks about mandatory overtime and all of those things.
Yeah, I can only really speak for myself when
Right.
it's not been a problem at Big Fish. There's times where I've worked a lot of overtime, um, but when I when it's not in those times, work-life balance is really good,
Mm.
and it's never been like you need to come in. It's more like, all right, let's get this update finished, or let's get this hot fix out.
Yeah. Uh, for so as somebody who is making games, what's typically something that you do to uh, I guess I don't know how exactly the process works
Hmm.
for you guys, but how do you typically like uh, go about your sort of research and development into like how you design something?
Well, we've got a process where once one of us is designing a feature, we'll do a tech review with the other engineers, not even engineers in our team necessarily, but other game engineers in our studio.
Mm.
And that's really insightful. They always have good feedback and ideas, and why are you doing it that way? And
Mm-hmm.
um, I feel like that's actually going back to your previous question. What do I miss from test?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty similar in engineering. It's the same type of people, and we work really closely with QA. So um, I don't know. It still feels pretty similar.
I I remember there being like a lot of people that left from where we used to work, and I think a large portion of them went over to Big Fish. Are there still people there from
Yeah,
WB?
yeah. There's quite a few people, but I've also noticed that a lot of those people also used to work at other places and have,
Mm,
it seems like anytime someone joins our team, QA or not, there's half the people on the team know them from a previous job.
right. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I definitely remember that feeling of like there being somewhat of a small world vibe
Yeah,
in
definitely.
games. Um, uh,
I've got something I
sure.
want to talk about briefly. These are um, things I want to ask you.
Sure.
So, when you're deciding whether or not to reopen a bug versus start a new one, what's your thought process?
Opening a new bug
Versus
or
reopening one that had previously been resolved as fixed. So,
uh okay. Oh, sorry.
so,
Go ahead.
so let's say you're playing your game or using your app or whatever, and you find something is wrong, and you look in the bug database, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a issue that's marked as fixed and closed. Um, I don't know. Maybe asking you isn't the best way to say it. So I guess this is one of my, and this might be different for every company you go to, every engineer you work with. But personally, my feeling is if the repro steps have changed or if the description has changed, don't reopen it. Open a new one. What are your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts?
Uh, I would say I would agree for the most part. Um, I know there's a lot of time where, I mean, maybe it's just because I've been doing it for the past, uh, what, 13 years, but
Uh,
like there is a kind of a gut feeling of like, uh, is this different enough to warrant a new bug?
right, right.
Um, and I would say almost. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, it
It
definitely,
really depends.
yeah,
But yeah, like if the steps to reproduce the issue have changed,
yeah,
um, I would say that that if that happens and what the thing that the user is then experiencing,
Yeah.
if what they're experiencing is the same and it's just the steps that changed, then I would probably just reopen the
Yeah.
issue, depending on how long ago it was.
Right. Yeah,
But yeah.
I ask because sometimes we get these bugs that are reopened, and it's just like I have to read through pages and pages of comments,
Mm,
going, "Oh, I did this and I got it," or "I wasn't able to get it like this, but changing the step is this."
yeah.
So my recommendation is if the steps have changed or if the description has changed, make a new bug,
Yeah.
and then you can always reference the old one, be like, "Hey, it seems similar to this one."
Yeah. Yeah. I would say most likely I would just make a new issue.
Yeah.
But if it was like recently fixed and is now no longer, and the issue has come back,
Right. Right.
like, unless it was like, I don't know, a day, maybe a week ago, I would probably just reopen the issue and
Yeah.
say that it's happening again. But like for the most part, I would just reopen a new one because it's easier to have that clean history to
Yeah.
like
It
work
is.
through.
It really is. Of course, there's also engineers who are the complete opposite. One guy I worked with at Blast would just be like, "Man, you reopened or you made this new bug, but there was a similar one logged 3 months ago." So
Yeah,
I guess you just have to know who you're working with.
yeah, that's true. I know there were lots of times when we would prefer to just reopen an issue than to write a new one. Uh, like, I guess that was like early on in my career. Um, but I don't even remember like why exactly that was the case. I think we
Yeah.
just I think there was a sense of like we don't want like a high bug count.
Yeah.
So it's better to just reopen one so that
Yeah, I
we
guess
don't
there's always
keep
those
making new
external
ones.
factors. Plus, some places do metrics and they're
Right.
like, "What's your reopen rate?" I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure because I know there have been times where it was like, oh, it's better to just reopen it because that's the issue. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know, that it really depends on the place because
Yeah.
like I know some places are a lot stricter on their like guidelines for those things.
Yeah. That
But
makes
yeah,
sense.
I would say just reopen or open a new one. I mean, it's not like you're I guess unless you're working with like your own server that you're hosting your like tracking system and like have limited resources, then yeah, maybe just reopen it. But like that seems strange.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we, for the most part, agree.
Oh yeah, yeah. I it's almost always just write a new one.
Yeah.
I would say it's much rarer to have to reopen. Although I would also say that like something that and maybe I guess most ways to do things are highly dependent on where you work, but like the difference between um uh writing a bug for a issue found in test versus moving a ticket back to track that issue.
Right.
Like that's something that's come up, maybe not exactly recently, but within the last couple of years or so, is like, at what point do you just use the ticket itself to track those issues versus write a new bug to track an issue?
Yeah. You're talking like a customer service ticket?
No. So, well, okay. So, at least in the system that we work, it's
Yeah.
tickets are stories, are I guess ticket is the general name for like any sort of item in our system. So like
Okay.
a ticket is a story, a bug, a
Uh-huh.
whatever. But then stories are like feature work versus bugs, which are
I see. Okay.
defects, and like
Gotcha.
yeah. So
So
like
right. Is this task not done or is it a bug?
right, yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, and so like that's definitely something where when it comes up, it's like okay, how deeply do I need to go into this to see whether or not this issue is
Right.
already existing, or is because the feature isn't done,
Yeah.
or is it
See,
an
that's
actual
where
different issue?
right. That's where acceptance criteria can come in nicely. If your acceptance criteria are really explicit, the
Yeah,
task is only done once all of them pass.
right. Yeah, AC is very very helpful, especially for like if you have somebody validating something that isn't uh as well versed with like the technology and can like infer a lot of things, then like having that acceptance criteria is like critical to being able to know for sure when something is or isn't done.
Yeah.
Did you say that you had another thing to ask, or was that
Well, all right. This is another complete. I think this one you probably won't agree with me on. Let's say you find a bug, right?
okay?
And you're researching the bug, so you try to reproduce it 3 more times, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't happen. What would you put the repro rate of the bug as?
uh So if I had it happen once and
And then you run
tried it 3 more times, so in
right,
total it's happened 4 times.
right.
So I would probably say 1 out of 4.
All right, that's where I
Or
disagree there. I
really?
feel like yeah, because I feel like repro rate should be when I attempted to reproduce the bug using the steps I outlined above, I was unable to reproduce it, right? So the
Oh,
repro rate's
okay.
actually 0 for 3.
Right.
In my opinion, that's the way it should work. Because there's a pretty big difference between a bug that you hit once and then could no longer repro using the steps you wrote out
Right.
versus one where you were able to occasionally repro it.
Okay. No, okay, yeah. I that makes sense. I think most of the time when am thinking through that, I would probably just label that as like not. I probably I don't know. It really
Yeah, I've seen
again
people
it
label bugs
depends.
like that, like one off, and that
Yeah,
works too.
yeah,
That
because
that
it's
that does
like
the same thing.
and personally, if I am logging a item that I would consider like a one off, uh, I would hope that there is some I don't know trust or reasonable doubt or like whatever you want to call it for like this is a one off because I've tried it more than just that one time and
Yeah.
it didn't happen, so it's a one off issue
It
versus
mostly comes up when I get a bug that says repro rate 1 of 10. And it's like, well, does that mean you hit it once and then tried to repro it 9 times and weren't able to? Or does that mean you hit it once and then hit it once more when reproing it 1 out
right,
of
right,
10
right.
times?
Yeah, I would say typically when I would log issues like that, it was the total number of attempts, including the time that I hit it accidentally.
Yeah. Yeah, I disagree with that approach, but I don't think very many people agree with me.
I mean,
And that's fair.
in thinking purely of like the words being used, like that makes sense to say the attempts are different than the initial
Right.
finding of this issue. Like that wasn't an attempt when you hit it the
Uh-huh.
first time, but I don't think I ever really actually thought about it until
Right.
now.
Yeah, I didn't think of it when I was a tester. It's when, as a developer, I get these bugs, and it's like, very low repro rate. The first thing I have to do is try to narrow down the repro rate, and that's when it becomes really important Are these tests were these steps actually used to reproduce it, or were they just what you remembered when you wrote the bug?
Right. Yeah, that's a good distinction. I don't think a lot of people think about that. And that, I think that's one of the things that doesn't really get communicated all that well between like development and test is
Yeah,
like there's a lot of like little things that test is taught to do, but it conflicts with like the way that we actually should be doing it.
yeah. I mean, it's a lot easier when you're integrated in a team, like when
Sure.
you're dedicated QA and you're actually working with the
Oh
devs,
yeah.
hopefully sitting near them. It's a lot easier. When
Yeah,
you're in a
yeah.
different building and you don't really have that two-way communication, like
Right.
we really didn't at WB for most of the time, I feel like that's a
Yeah.
lot harder.
Yeah, I don't remember like ever really talking one on one with developers when I was there.
Yeah,
I maybe once, maybe I think I went down to like where they were and like talked to one, but that was very rare.
yeah,
And I was there for what, like 3 years in total.
yeah, yeah. It's too bad because I can't tell you how many times our testers, will point something out or just like ask a question, and we're all like, "Why didn't we think of that?"
Mm, yeah,
It's that edge case stuff and that, But what if
yeah,
stuff?
yeah. There is a lot of that. Although it is interesting, like going from QA into like more of a development role. Do you find yourself not uh uh I don't know how to phrase it. Do you find yourself like seeing something get brought up and like thinking to yourself that thought of like, oh, I should have knew to like do that thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm always learning, and everyone on the team will bring up different perspectives and have different ideas, and always worth getting everyone's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
One thing we do that I really like is we have Slack channels dedicated to different parts of the team. So, like, we'll have an engineer Slack channel, an artist, but they're not exclusive to those people. They're
Mm.
just for talking about the engineering or the art. So, QA's and engineering Slack. We're all in art Slack, so we can at least see what they're talking about. And if we see something worth commenting on, everyone's allowed to do so.
Nice. Yeah, that's very similar to what we do at Sprout. Is like the all of our or the majority of our channels are all public channels, so like anything is welcome for anybody to participate in. So it's a very inclusive culture.
Yeah.
Um, do I guess we could shift more to like what are some things you do in your spare time? Are you still making games on the side or
I am, unfortunately, Big Fish does not allow me to participate in game jams.
that
So
makes
I haven't
sense?
been doing that as much. Um, so I actually am the captain of an ice hockey team.
Oh,
That somehow happened. We're the GSHL Division 7 Ice Hawks. We were at the
mm,
top of our division standings when all the ice arenas got closed down.
right.
So we'll see what happens. But it's been a ton of fun learning how to skate and everything.
What do you think draws you towards ice hockey?
I don't know. I never really played any team sports growing up or anything, so it's something I had kind of thought about wanting to do. And I did play a sports game called NHL Hits,
Mm,
and it's the NFL Blitz version of NHL, and it's completely unrealistic, but it's fun. So one of the other developers at Big Fish suggested to me at one point, "Hey, I used to play in the GSHL. You should give it a try." And it's a blast. It's really fun. I've been skating for a year now, and I'm terrible, but I've learned a lot.
Uh, do you find yourself coming at problems that you face on the I'm not even sure, the rink, I guess.
Yeah, I can't really say that I do. I mean, yeah, I'm just so not used to playing sports. Everything happens so fast. I don't really think that far ahead in terms of that. All I try to do is read up on strategies and try not to be out of position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my problem is I overanalyze most of the things that I do. So
Yeah,
I think that would inhibit me from playing sports, especially because I
and
would probably just be overthinking, like, why are points counted this way, or why do people need to be positioned in this way, or
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's fair.
it's probably not fun to play with somebody like that.
Now we've got all types on my. It's pretty interesting. We've got a pretty good spread. We could actually, I think, between us, make a game or something. We've got a graphic designer. We've got uh, data analysts, all sorts of people on our team.
Mm,
I guess it's kind of a cross section of the people
right.
in Seattle who can, afford hockey equipment and the fees and stuff like that.
What do you enjoy most about ice hockey?
That's a good question. I don't know. Just scoring a goal in it, for the first time in my life, pretty much in any sport, was pretty
Mm,
exciting. Um, but I play defense. I'm like our last string left defenseman, so
mm,
I don't do that much. It's just fun to be part of a team.
yeah. Uh, do you do you have any sort of either creative or other type of outlets that you have to unwind and relax, or like
Well,
decompress or anything?
I'm trying to learn new skills. I try sketching once every few years, and I'm always terrible at it. But it's worth trying.
Like
Um,
sketching, like
yeah, sketching.
landscapey things or other
Try
things?
to do like little, cute little characters that we've used in our game jams. Usually,
Okay.
like little creatures. Um, yeah, I'm really bad at it, and that's okay.
No, I
But
mean,
recently, I've been trying to learn Blender modeling and
right.
eventually animation. So I was thinking of just finding things on my desk and trying to model them in Blender, like my coffee cup and stuff like that.
Have you heard of the? I don't even know if it has like a name, but there's like an animation practice where you try to give life to an inanimate object to like practice that sort of like thinking of like how do you express emotion with something that isn't human.
Interesting. I have not heard of that, but that sounds really interesting.
I think I heard it on some video I watched, like,
Yeah.
I, I don't know,
One
10,
one
10
sketch.
years ago or something.
Yeah, one sketching like Coursera or whatever course I took did have us start out with just drawing shapes and then giving them faces,
Mm,
basically.
yeah.
Just being like, so I guess that's kind of similar idea.
Yeah, because then you have to like think about how you're going to be structuring it, and like what are you trying to convey with the thing, and like
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting practice to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Um,
definitely nowhere near there. I'm still trying to figure out the controls and the hotkeys.
yeah.
Like I tried modeling something or other and I thought I was doing fine and then I rotated and it's like it just looked like a mess. So I had somehow extended the wrong edge way too far in the wrong direction. It was pretty
Mm.
funny actually.
Let's see. What else do we got?
So how about you? I haven't asked you many questions for a while. What do you do as a creative outlet? You mentioned you were doing some drawing before, right?
Yeah, I occasionally do doodling. I I'm kind of hit or miss with my things. I mean, I've never really tried drawing any sort of thing in great detail, so most of my things are just silly doodles. Um, and then outside of that, just lots of games and
Cool.
yeah, I mean that's kind of the majority of it is either doodling, watching videos, or playing games, and then spending time with family.
Hey, that's important.
That's true.
Awesome.
It is a priority.
Yeah.
And thinking of questions. That's another thing that I do. Or I wouldn't even say thinking of questions as much as just thinking about things.
Yeah. So do you have a goal with this series? Are you just publishing them, or do you have like, are you going to write a book or something?
Haven't really thought of writing a book. I mean, sorry, I've thought about writing books. I haven't thought about writing a book for this. I would say the main goal for this is just to, I don't know, give myself more of a vocabulary and to kind of learn what exactly I want by talking to others and seeing what they have or what they want, and to see where that then takes me. Yeah, because right now, I mean, I enjoy what I do, but I don't know if it's really there's elements of what I do that I still feel like is not 100% what I want to do, and I think I'm still figuring that out and hoping that by talking with others I'll get a better sense of like what exactly I want by hearing what other people want. At least that's the goal. Who knows if that'll happen. If not, then it's just going to be a whole lot of conversations with people.
Well, maybe the journey will end up being the outcome.
Well, that would be good. What about you? What are you do you let me think. Do you see yourself continuing down your current career path, or are there other avenues that you would be interested in checking out?
Yeah, I mean that's a really hard question to answer. It's I really like the people I work with. I really like my job, so I'm not like really thinking about anything else at this point.
That's
But
fair.
I do miss game jams.
All that franticness. I've wanted to do a game jam, but I don't know if I'd really ever be able to, because it just seems like there's just so little time to do so much.
Yeah. It was really easier when I was younger too. It's
Right.
like, if you have family engagements, that eats a huge amount of your time, and yeah.
Yeah, I get that. So let's see. We're at about an hour-ish.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk about like your path that you've taken to where you are now?
Um,
At least as much as you're willing to talk about.
I don't know. Just making games forced me to learn lots of different parts of programming. I had to learn how to do file I/O, had to learn how to do graphics, how to work with textures, how to do audio. So that was a really good way to force me to address all those. I mean, even making your Python script into an executable that other people can just double click on and run.
Right.
That was But then when I got this opportunity at Big Fish, I got put on something completely different, which was porting a game to Android.
Mm.
I had no idea what I was doing. Just kind of slowly learned bit by bit. Um, and yeah, each game has I've kind of learned different aspects. I've worked in I think 4 different game engines, 5 different game engines, including my game jam stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'd say it's just about uh, be willing to put yourself out there and do something that you haven't tried before. And
Yeah,
yeah,
that definitely resonates with me. I've been less less okay with not doing things than I used to be.
yeah,
I my mentality has definitely changed from, wanting things to happen and never seeing them happen to, like, if I don't do it, then it's not going to happen. So
yeah.
I would
That's
much
totally
rather
right.
just try to attempt it than have it never exist.
Well, you should try game jam.
Yeah, well,
Even if it's not a 48-hour one, you can just set aside 8 hours, and it doesn't have to be a complete game. Like we made complete games, which was probably a really bad idea, but it forced me to learn a lot. But we should have
right.
started with just make an interesting mechanic. You don't need a main menu.
Sure.
You don't even need save load, probably. You just need to be able to open the game and see the mechanic that you're trying to convey. And hopefully it's a fun one.
Yeah.
And you can do that type of thing in 8 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something I should do and will hopefully one of these days start that up, because that's another issue that I end up running into is uh I have these weird spurts of like motivation to do something, and then like I'm doing it, and like I'm just like 100% thinking about that thing, and then
Uh-huh.
occasionally I'll like hit like a roadblock, and then all of that momentum just like
Yeah.
disappears, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't even know how to get back into like the same, just like
But
uh,
hopefully you learn something during that part, right?
I mean,
And then the next time
hopefully.
you start something up, you've got that knowledge. So
Right.
just because you didn't finish it doesn't mean it wasn't worth
Oh,
doing.
sure, right. Yeah, no, I mean there's always like the lessons learned throughout the
Yeah.
process. Um, but yeah, I don't know what it is. There's just that sort of like initial motivation just like can so easily just disappear.
Yeah.
It's just weird to think about. Like at one moment you like are only thinking about this one thing, and then all of a sudden you have no idea how to get back into that state.
Right. Yeah, and maybe that's when it's time to move on to a different project. I don't know
Yeah.
how to. I don't know of a good way to get back into that.
Yeah. I know that for me personally, I mean, it hasn't worked 100% of the time, but I know there have been times where like I was wanting to like make a game, started working on it, got however much of a percent done, maybe a percent done, uh, got sidetracked by other stuff, and then lost that momentum. But
Yeah.
uh, something that I've done is like if I re kind of surround myself with those initial things that made me want to do it, I've been able to kind of tap back into that momentum again, at least like a hint of that momentum, and that kind of has gotten me back into
Hmm.
doing some things. I know
Yeah.
there's times where like I don't know, watch a video of somebody talking about making a game, or like talking about how they made a game, and then I'm like, oh, I should really get back into doing that again, and that kind of reignites that fire.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely hasn't been like a 100% fix all type of thing. But it's helped a little bit.
Cool. Well, after this, I'll definitely send you that book I used, and I'll also send you my first Game Jam game in case you
Sure.
want to try modding that or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
But you've definitely inspired me to take a look at my latest project and maybe try to get myself back in that mindset again.
Yeah, there's just something about, I don't know what it is, but like there's just that I think it's got to be something with like me. I know there have been times where I've like verbally said out loud like I don't want to just like consume stuff. Like I'm just tired of consuming things, and I want to be a somebody that's making the thing for others to consume. Yeah. And so like getting into that mindset and then seeing, oh, this other person made a game, it's like, yeah, I should do that too. Like why would I not want to do that? So maybe that's a way just to surround yourself with those reminders of that thing.
Yeah. Well, one thing I have to say, I am most motivated when I'm not playing games that don't have an end. If that makes sense. Like games like, World of Warcraft. There's just no end.
Right.
You can play it as much as you want.
Yeah.
I find myself happier when I'm playing games that do have an end. And it's like, okay, that was an 8-hour experience. That was really good.
Yeah.
Now move on to the next thing.
Yeah. I've had more enjoyment with games that are like 4-hour long indie games that have like a very nice beginning, middle, and end, and like you can just, I mean, for some people maybe it's a little more difficult, but like I can just sit down in one setting and like start and complete it and just feel satisfied with that experience.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. I mean, I definitely don't follow that rule all the time.
Sure.
Fall back into, new expansion's out, I'll try WoW, or I'm gonna get back into Brawl Stars or whatever. But
yeah, I mean, and that's kind of that going back and just watching like an old TV show that you used to watch. Like it's just that kind of mixture of novelty and familiarity that just satisfies all those cravings.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will let you go. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, it was nice talking with you. I feel like I haven't talked with people from WB too much lately. I should.
Yeah, I also have not.